time I've been wandering through heaven and hell and earth, crawling from the trenches of silence that grips the world.
Mark here from Rock and Load. This evening I am joined by the one, the only Mr. Ross Harding, lead vocalist of South African rock supergroup Fear of Falling. The gentlemen are releasing the latest single, All My Time, this coming Friday, August 19th, and Ross is here to chat to us about all things South African rock. How are you, sir?
I'm great, thanks, brother. How are you doing?
Grand. I'm broken, actually, because I was literally just doing 5 days there at a UK rock festival, so I literally flew in late last night, back into reality, and it's not good.
I don't know how you're doing this interview right now.
Yeah, either do I.
You're made of iron. You're made of iron, my man.
Still running on adrenaline. You know,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
fake. I'll crash later. I'll crash and burn later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you're well used to it, though, living the rock and roll lifestyle yourself.
Yeah, not so much anymore, because when you're on the other side of the fence, as it were, you need to have your wits about you, and deliver those performances.
That is true.
But yeah, as a 18-year-old festival going, I wouldn't be a stranger to sleeping on the grass. Let's just say that,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because at the festival I was at, there's the extremes. So like you have the headlining bands playing the main stage. You have obviously a larger second tent, and then you have what we call a new blood stage, which is up and coming bands who've won the opportunity to play the festival.
Oh, cool.
Those guys camp and they party hard. Whereas the professionals obviously keep the shit together.
Yeah, because they don't know yet. They're like, really. I was there exactly the same. I was super amped to be playing the festival, and it was amazing. And we were going to be playing on the Saturday, and we got there on Thursday, and by Saturday I was toast. I was toast. Guys were like schlepping me out of some mud hole somewhere. Like, Ross, you need to perform now. I go, oh Lord, I better do this.
Yeah, I can only imagine. They caught up in the moment, of the
man.
festival.
It's so cool that festivals are happening again, and that people are able to get out, and just, I don't know if it's some sort of normalization, but it's entertainment and music and art is such an integral part of a person's life. That you feel when it wasn't there and you weren't able to perform and watch bands. I love watching bands still. If I see cool bands are playing in my town or whatever, I'll go out and I'll check them out. And just not to be able to do that, just not to be able to go and watch a local band, or attend a festival or something, was just so weird.
Yeah, it was. And the funny thing was, actually, that festival that I was just at was the first proper festival that happened in the UK after lockdown last year.
Right.
So like the people went mad last year, because it was so weird, because obviously I think it was like the 15th of July in 2021 when the UK opened up, and this was the first festival in August, and like literally like it was just chaos, bedlam, from going from one extreme to the other. We're having 20,000 people in the field just going mental over rock and metal. It was such a shock to the system, Great, but a shock to the system.
Yeah, but absolutely. Yeah.
It takes you a while to acclimatize to normality as well, after being hidden in the house for 2 years.
Most definitely. And to just be outside, and just normal social events it's a strange thing that happens, in sort of mass psychology. I just watched this Woodstock 99.
Yeah, just watched
a thing on Netflix, and I was like, wow, like, I didn't understand. You've heard things about Woodstock 99 was a disaster, but I've never actually, I confess, I've never actually gone into any of the details. Even my old lady was watching it. She phoned me and she's like, Ross, did you watch this Woodstock thing? I'm like, no, I haven't yet. My old lady's watched it. I better watch this thing, and it was mad. It was just absolute pandemonium.
Yeah,
and it just shows you what can happen with all that pent up aggression and what's happening in society and an event, and the mechanics of people is so intricate, and so complex that it's actually quite mind boggling to think about it, and to just step back and look at how these things work.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't want to think about it because you don't know what you're responsible for, you know, especially with like the likes of the Limp Bizkit gig, when Fred Durst was winding up the crowd and they were so pent up already, you know, it
Unbelievable.
Started overspilling into the whole festival. But yeah, c'est la vie. It was a crazy time indeed.
Yeah.
Let's get back to you guys. Yeah. So first and foremost, tell me a little bit about yourself as a musician and your sort of history, your background.
So I've pretty much been into music since I was a kid, as long as I can remember. Started playing guitar at 10, 11, 12, around there. And it sort of just developed eventually to a point where I knew this was going to be what I did, you know. Chris Buck, a fellow UK guitar player, you might have seen him.
Brilliant
from Wales. I see he's got this cool quote that says, being a guitarist is nature's way of the otherwise unemployable. And I was like, yes. So, so I've pretty much been doing music my whole adult life or in some sort of professional capacity. And when the guys from Fulfil got hold of me with regard to the vocal position that opened up, you know, I was really keen. We had a meeting and it's only been 2 or 3 months and we've been super busy, you know. The band has had a fair amount of success. I try to say it modestly. It's had pretty awesome success in a very short period of time, which we're very blessed to have happened. And so to jump onto that train, so to speak, was just a really cool and it's just been a cool journey so far.
Yeah. And so like your earlier days and sort of getting into rock and music and stuff like that, what piqued your interest? What bands grabbed your attention? And
when I was like really young, I remember driving around with my mom and listening to like Eric Clapton, and especially the acoustic. There was this Unplugged album that he did that just like that was wow to me.
Phenomenal album.
Yeah. So I think from then, but when the first time I can remember being extremely excited about something like rock music, you know, I was probably at the time, I must have been like 8, you know, 7 or 8. So I was pretty young. And it was Linkin Park and Seether and these kind of bands that, you know, I felt this thing like really, really grasp. And I was like, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this. I don't really know what to make of it. I'm kind of too young to, what is this, you know? Yeah. And fortunately, I had an older cousin who kind of guided me on the way. And, you know, he was a rock and roller and a metalhead. So he started introducing me to bands like Metallica and Pantera and Sepultura and like the heavier stuff that he was into, but also some rad local bands later on, like the Narrow, South African guys, and Vonnerbloem, also South African. And so I think it was just like a big pot of music that I had growing up, you know, lots and lots of different stuff, rock and roll music mostly. I dabbled in a little bit of like classical, especially classical guitar, but sort of compose, you know, classical era composers like Beethoven and Mozart, especially the piano stuff. But I think that came later on with more of a mature taste, so to speak, you know, understanding the musical, especially when I got into music and started learning about music, that became clearer to me in the sense that was another side of music that I didn't have any idea about.
It's so complex, you know, when you think about the classical aspect, especially the orchestrations and the multiple compositions for multiple instruments at once, you know, it's another level of musicianship, really, isn't it? Yeah,
so that I think that genius level of composing has been maybe something that I strive towards it subconsciously. Obviously, I'm not. How do I put this? Let me try to find an eloquent way to put this. Like that might be I don't want to be a classical composer, right? But there's sort of that bar that was set by those musicians at that time who had no technology to help them write, you know. and the scores and scores and scores of music have been composed inside these people's minds and transcribed, and that music has really, really stood the test of time, you know, all the way through. It's hundreds of years old, literally, you know, and it's still performed, and it's still admired. And I think that's kind of, you know, I've never really been a trained musician in that sense. So something comes up and, oh, maybe we should make our music a bit more like that, or maybe we should make our music a little bit more like this. It's always had a sort of home base for me, you know, which has been rooted in blues stuff and kind of classic rock. I think guitar players tend to be kind of conservative, especially blues guitar players. Like, we don't want to push the boundary too far. I don't know about digital things, you know, the amp's got to be cooking and, you know, that kind of vibe. So there's maybe that for me at least. Although having said that, the band has gotten me using digital pedals and stuff now because it's just easier. They were like, no. They're like, no, this is much easier, trust me. So I did swallow my words a little bit, like, okay, yeah, there's definitely space. But yeah, there's always been something quite integral about music to me, and finding something that like sits, or that I feel at least is honest enough for it to be timeless. You know, that's kind of an approach that I take when I'm writing, at least, is making something that I feel will not fade away with the trends, you know, and whatever's hip and happening at that time. Yeah.
It's funny though, obviously, as any sort of artistic expression, it's a personal journey, isn't it, really, music? And then obviously it's about connecting with other people who are in the same sort of wavelength as yourself. You talked on, like say, the blues guitarists tend to be very traditional, very sort of work within a sort of rigid sort of structure generally, but there's always those musicians who'll push the boundaries as well, like to say Joe Bonamassa in the blues and other guys.
Gary Clark Jr.
Yeah, and you know,
one of my favorites, man.
Like that there. They'll bring in the jazz influences and other things like that there as well, you know. So
you know, that's an interesting idea that you bring up there, because if you think about traditionalists, blues cats can be quite conservative. You know, metal, I don't know so much, because there's so much different metal music. You know, when I think about metal, I think of like, you know, sort of like Metallica and Slayer and those kind of bands. But like what heavy metal is now is way different than, you know, Black Sabbath was like the heaviest thing on earth when they released Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or like the song Black Sabbath, you know. That tritone, still now, in fact, you know, if you hear that now, you're like, whoa, that's really, there's doom and like Satan is coming, you know. But so with that being said, within the blues realm, there's definitely, I think, room for kind of pushing the envelope a lot, and an artist like Gary Clark Jr., in my opinion, he's done it the best, at least in the mainstream style so far, just because of the fact that he's, I think, been able to take the blues and put it into this almost like pop music realm, which it hasn't been a part of for a really long time, you know. I stand corrected, but I think Eric Clapton quoted something like that. He reckons Gary Clark Jr. is the most important thing to happen to blues in like the last, you know, 30 or 40 years. I stand corrected on that quote, but something along those lines. And basically, I think that there is a level of conservatism because you want tradition, and culture is important. You know, it's not that you want to push the envelope so much that it's not recognizable anymore. You want it to keep the core values that it has as an artistic expression. You know, there's tradition about the blues, but at the same time, you need to update it enough for other artists, you know, other audiences to be able to latch on who may not have otherwise heard it. You know, guys that are into hard rock stuff or you know, R&B stuff or whatever to latch onto those.
Yeah, you've guys like John Mayer and stuff who are obviously bringing blues into the mainstream.
John Mayer, absolutely. John Mayer, phenomenal composer.
Yeah, like, you know, because every album's different, you know, from Americana through to pop, through to your pop rock, and then really blues stuff with the trio. So a very diverse artist who, again, is bringing people into that realm that normally wouldn't be there, you know. So very important artist as well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then the young guns, like we mentioned, Chris Buck, one of my favorite guitar players at the moment.
Yeah.
Like so much taste, you know. And another way of, I mean, obviously that's more guitar based. And his band, Cardinal Black, there you've got the vocal element as well, where Chris Buck's sort of solo stuff is more about the guitar virtuosity. So it may isolate some audiences to a point, whether you're into instrumental music or not. But Cardinal Black is a cool example of a way that you know, again, that sort of bluesy undertone is taken and you know, presented in a slightly different way that is fresh. And you know, I would love to watch that band live. I need to get out to the UK and check them out.
Yeah, I think they're touring actually towards the end of the year. So it's, I know. They don't come across. I'm based in Ireland. Unfortunately, they won't come across to Ireland either. You know, they might come on the coattails of maybe another tour, and fingers crossed.
Right.
But I've seen Chris play about a year or two ago. I think just before the pandemic, actually played with Buck and Evans. So
cool. Yeah.
And that's special. Like, as you say, he is one of the most unique guitar players out there, I think. His touch and technique is just so...
Kind of sings. His guitar sings, you know. Yeah.
There's nobody
else. He does like these, you know, it's these type of like sweet melodies. And I've pinched a couple of licks, I won't lie.
Yeah.
I've been like, I like that, thank you. I'll take that. Yeah. The blues is borrowed, eh? That's what BB King says. The blues is borrowed. I'm like, I like that. I'll take that one. Just put it in my sky. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'll bang it out in the next time I need to do an epic solo. I'll be like, I wrote this all by myself.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tell me about your voice then. So when did you discover your voice?
So I think I kind of gravitated towards wanting to be a singer in my early days learning music because I wanted to write songs. So when I picked up the guitar for the first time, I think what really dawned on me was that, oh, wow, I can actually make my own music, you know? So I think I only got into the technicalities of guitar and music much later on. I'm going to come back to the vocal point because it's kind of tied. But when I discovered that I could make music, then it became about writing music, but then lyrics and vocals were sort of there as well. Okay, well, songs, you know, what am I going to write about? What are these lyrics going to be about? And I think when I started my first kind of serious band in school, or if you call it that, you know, the first time I managed to like wrangle people together and keep them in the same room for like an hour, like, can we do this band thing? But like, okay, well, you kind of sing the most, so you sing, you know? And I was like, okay, I can sing somewhat. I don't know anything about it, but, you know, I must have been 17 or 18 at the time. And it wasn't until I was about 21 when I joined my first, like, serious band. Also, funny enough, like, I also replaced a singer who had left that band. I didn't play guitar in the band at all, so that was weird for me. I was just a singer now. And that was when I didn't have a guitar to hide behind, so I needed to begin to work on my voice as a you know, a front and center instrument and not kind of secondary to the guitar. And I've been through an interesting journey with vocals because it's been a lot of habits and unlearning habits and picking up new ones and improving it, you know, so it's been super interesting. I think I'm getting to a point where I feel comfortable with my voice, but it's taken a lot of work, you know. Yeah. It's taken a very conscious effort to focus on what I'm doing and to, you know, like we mentioned festivals. I'd go to a festival and do a gig, and then the next day I would be toast. I couldn't do another show. My voice would be fried from smoking too much and drinking too much and that whole thing. Yeah. So there's other sides of the voice that have happened for me, which you know, have become more about a lifestyle thing and you know, not only an instrument, but it's definitely a physical activity, and it's you know, one's health and mental state and physical health, and that is definitely will definitely affect your voice. So I've become quite mindful of that in my approach to singing, you know.
Yeah, well, I've interviewed Glenn Hughes a few times over the years, and
oh man, really,
constantly refers to himself as a vocal athlete, and it's very, very true. You know, obviously, it's like a vocal muscle. You know, you do have to take care of it. You have to treat it like you know, and those people who don't, well, you know, it's about the longevity.
Can I just stop you to just be a little bit jealous that you just spoke to like one of my icons? You're like, oh, just when I spoke to Glenn Hughes. Anyway,
I know.
Anyway,
I know. Like,
man,
I caught him doing the done the Deep Purple thing there we while back in Belfast, and seeing him live, extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
Man, and he's like just and it's still now, like today, you know.
Yeah.
When I mean the vocals that he was doing with Deep Purple on like Burn and whatever were already gnarly, and he was partying. That's the other thing. Like those dudes were all partying back in the day.
Oh yeah,
and
big time.
And like it's crazy, and for him to, I've never had the opportunity to see him live as yet, but I've watched a lot of live stuff online and whatever, and I'm always like, how is this dude still doing this? Like, so maybe better, you know, with that age voice has got a bit more grit, and I'm just like, wow, this dude is a machine.
Yeah, I think just again when he cleaned up after all the years of drinking and whatever and drinking drugs, I think he just realized the importance of it, you know, and literally just looks after himself so well now when it comes to the vocal side of things. So phenomenal voice and phenomenal range, and the work that he's done with like Sabana Massa with the Black Country Communion, his own solo stuff as well, like that Heavy album that he put out years ago was just phenomenal, you know, one of the best albums of that year. So a stunning musician. But as you say, I'm always curious about vocalists and how they do manage that, because obviously such a thing to do. I've came across artists that obviously at times that had to sort of put out of gigs doing 3-4 nights in a row because of this strain, because they give so much on stage, but equally again, you know, you're human, like everything else. It's hard to keep that level of intensity up. Night after night.
And you know, something that I'm trying to become better at is also listening to my body. You know, it goes through different stages. So, for example, in Johannesburg, where we base, in the winter time is especially tough on my voice because there's a lot of dust. It doesn't rain at all for a few months, and it's pollution, and there's a lot of dust and sinus and those kind of things. You know, so doing 3 gigs in a row in a week is very tough. You know, so I'll often find myself going into the set list and changing a couple songs around, giving myself some vocal breathers, that kind of thing, because you do have to listen to your body as well, you know, and on a good night when you feel great, you know, then you can let rip, but you got to be able to manage that appropriately, because you will shred your voice up if you don't, you know. Your body will eventually just say enough.
And do you do any sort of vocal exercises, for example, for yourself on a daily basis, or routines, or say before show?
Absolutely. So I probably spend in the region of like 2 to 3 hours a day on my voice, but not always intense. It can be lighter stuff as well. And then I don't have like a serious warm up anymore. There was a time when I didn't warm up at all, and then I warmed up way too much. So now it's, you know, there's a bunch of guys on YouTube and that I've really enjoyed following and taking advice from as a singer. This one guy in particular is called Ken Tamplin. So I bought his vocal course a couple of years ago, and I've been doing that just on my computer, and that helped a lot. Yeah. But I think what I realized much later on was how I'm utilizing certain techniques and ideas, and sort of what their place is psychologically as well. So, you know, it's not practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice that makes perfect, right? Yeah. So if you're just really hacking at something and you don't have the proper concept of how it works, then, you know, it's kind of pointless. So that's why I say there's been a lot of like inward looking and okay, I'm struggling with this, but why? Is it because I just need to work at it more, or is it because perhaps there's a better, more efficient way to do this?
Yeah.
So a lot of my, the last 3 years, I'd say, a lot of what's gone into my vocals has been very introspective, and a lot of frustration, admittedly, because of setting certain goals and just knowing that they do take a bit of time. Yeah. And so now what's been cool is working with. That was a big kind of reason for me wanting to take on this role in Fear of Falling, because it's a style of music that I've listened to, the band's influences and tone, but I haven't been a part of per se in my career, not to this kind of degree. So that was really interesting in the sense that I could use, all these skills that I've been working with in the studio, in my own, solo projects and that, and then really bring it to the forefront. And it's helped a ton. It really has. Yesterday I was doing a really long session, not singing the whole time, guitars and stuff as well. But I think we were in studio for like 10 or 12 hours yesterday. So towards the end of the session, I could feel, okay, I'm done now. Yeah. But I remember a time where I do like an hour of, when in the studio, you kind of sing harder. It's more like a sprint versus a gig, which is kind of like a marathon. So you do like an hour or two and you've been screaming it and you're like, I'm done, Now I could do like take after take after take after take for a couple of hours, and then I'll feel, okay, I'm straining a bit now. Let's stop, So it's definitely a stamina thing, but it's got a lot to do with your mindset and placement, and again, like I mentioned, that introspective look at to like, how is my body functioning, how is my voice functioning, and working with that.
Yeah. And have you ever taken any vocal lessons at all? Like, have you ever went for anything?
Yeah, I did do some lessons when I did a bit of classical and sort of jazz stuff, which did help at the time. I think the vocal teacher that I had then had the best of intentions, but in retrospect, some of the techniques that she gave me, I'm like, oh, I understand where you're going with it. But because it wasn't really in the sort of style that I was singing, I did find it a little bit difficult to kind of translate that into what I was doing, which was singing like heavy rock music, So I did a little bit of training with her. Some of the exercises I still use now, actually. It's like 10 years ago. But most of it has been a kind of self-study and just picking up from lots of people online. And I can talk shop about vocals like all day because I just really dig it, and it's like one of the singers that I'm sad I haven't listened to that much is Miles Kennedy.
Stunning vocalist.
He's probably the best singer in the rock business at the moment.
I was fortunate to catch him on his solo acoustic tour when he came through Belfast. And genuinely, it's one of the most memorable gigs that I've ever witnessed. Catching him and him and Chris Cornell. Actually caught Chris Cornell doing the acoustic tour when he was doing an amazing thing as well. So those two guys just really, stood out as just stellar vocalists. And I thought to myself, I remember going to the gig for Chris Cornell thinking, am I going to enjoy this? Because I thought he was going to be really almost grating to listen to. Wasn't at all in the flesh. When he was doing it on the acoustic, it was just so powerful. And Miles Kennedy had that as well, that sort of ability to just connect with the whole room. Phenomenal. Yeah. So both, you've mentioned two of like probably my favorite singers. Chris Cornell is my favorite singer of all time. My favorite musician, really. It's been my icon for as long as I can remember. And what I like about Miles is that he is a technical singer. So he's done a lot of training and he's lots of interviews and things. I watched this cool one with him talking to Rick Beato. Yeah, it's a great interview.
And great interview, and he's not shy to sort of get into the, his background about singing. And I find that extremely enlightening and really helpful, because there's a guy who's almost got this, like it looks so natural, you know, because he's made it that way. Like he's worked at it so much and with so much discipline that it is natural, you know. And even him, you know, he'll say, oh, sometimes I've got to like weave around, you know, a certain vocal line, or not that anybody would even know. You're like, oh my God, that was so beautiful. You know, the guy just opens his mouth and it's like amazing. But, so I've taken a lot of inspiration from these singers, and trying to like rework it in my own way. Knowing that one of the major things about the voice is that it does work differently, you know. There are similarities, and there's certain things that you can pick up from singers that will work for you. But there's been a bunch of stuff that I picked up from like female singers as well, who might, like, especially like opera singers, when I've listened to that and listened to like how they shape vowels and that kind of thing. Yeah. Although that range is like way out of my ability as a male, you know.
Yeah. Like, have you ever listened to there's a YouTuber called the Charismatic Voice?
I haven't.
No, you should check her out. Now, she was a female opera singer, but she sort of specializes in interviews with singers from around the world. But she started getting into rock and metal. So then,
okay, yeah,
very, very, very interesting, because she will obviously then discuss techniques and how they approach vocals and whatever, you know.
Yeah.
She was at the festival that I was at last year, and that's what sort of keyed me on to her. And watched a few of her interviews.
You said that was called the Charismatic Singer.
Charismatic Voice.
Charismatic Voice. Okay.
Yeah, really well worth checking out. From your
yeah,
point of view,
thanks for that.
A vocal interest. You'll really enjoy this, what she talks about, because she delves into the techniques of rock vocalists, and does reaction videos as well on all the sort of metal artists, and then we'll talk about the techniques used to create.
Because this kind of those kind of platforms for singers to be able to speak to one another is super valuable. There's so much on guitar and this and that, and I think vocals to a large degree is something. There's a level of mystery around vocals and the voice, because some people have this like godlike singing voice, and then other people just don't, and then that's it, you know. But it's not really the case. It's really just about finding out how your voice works and experiment. I mean, my close family and my girlfriend and whoever has lived with me, you know, have heard me sounding the worst that you can ever imagine when I've gone through, like, I'm trying something, you know. So I'm going to sound like a dying banshee for the next 3 hours and just deal with it, because like I need to do this so that I can figure it out later on, you know. So there's a lot of that. You got to be prepared to make a bit of a fool of yourself, you know. Even when I do a bit of coaching myself, and the first thing I say is, when we are in this room, there is zero judgment. Like, there is no judgment here, because you're going to have to allow your voice to crack and break and do all sorts of weird things so that you can, you know, find out, okay, cool, there's a limit. Okay, there's something is not going right. How do we address that now, you know? Yeah. And that took a long time for me to do. I sort of hovered in a certain range and a certain style for really long, and I just kind of got to a point when I was like, nope, I need to find a bridge over this.
Yeah, it's interesting, because many years ago now, when I was in my 20s, I probably even younger, I think I'd done a singer-songwriter night, and I used to write songs myself. Started off on the acoustic guitar and went down to the local sort of singer-songwriter nights and put myself out there. And I do remember just that experience of trying to sing live for the very first time in front of a crowd. And the only thing I could probably make it sound like it felt to me was like a pressure cooker. It's like somebody releasing the lid of a pressure cooker, where all of a sudden the vocals just couldn't be controlled, and I was just like trying to rein that back in, because whether it be notes trying to reach a certain note, you're just like, it was like out of control, you know, because the nerves just literally took over.
Just because of nerves,
So obviously that's all part of it, is learning to control all of that. But then again, obviously, your breathing and everything, you know, diaphragm, all that sort of thing is so important for you to actually be able to do it properly, you know. So that's why I was asking, especially about the vocal lessons, because obviously there is technique to this beyond a natural ability, which sometimes if you don't go down that route and maybe get that advice, you can do damage to yourself as well, because I was speaking to drummers recently who had long-term injuries because they never did that, you know, and obviously just played too hard, gave too much, and have paid the price.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with vocals, initially finding out that there's so much to learn is quite overwhelming. You know, you're like, oh my God, diaphragm, you know, diaphragmatic support and breathing and vowel modification and placement and like what, you know, there's like so much, but the first step is to figure out that if you don't, you know, at least start learning some of these things, that you're actually on the back foot all the time, you know? Yeah. Like one of the super foundations is just figuring out how to manage breath control appropriately, you know?
Yeah.
I mentioned, if I'm in the studio and I can do 10 takes or 20 or 50 takes, then I can use the breath like a little less sparingly and I can go a bit mad. But like if I'm doing a 3-hour gig, there's no way I can do that from like the start until the end, you know? So you got to learn how to, where can I open up a bit more? When do I need to reserve it, you know? And that's just one sort of technique with breathing, you know, that just helps you. And it's like that with anything, you know, with drummers, especially you mentioned, they also get wrist problems and that kind of thing, you know. It's a simple thing about like playing like this versus playing like that, or whatever the case is. And so there's a lot of psychology that goes into it too, you know, just by being able to like learn and be willing to learn.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. It's such a physical thing as well, especially live, because I again, just coming from the festival, watching guys absolutely murder themselves on stage performing, you know, never standing still, and you wonder, how do they do it? How do they perform, get the vocals absolutely right while giving such a physical performance, you know? So such an interesting technique to master.
I think it takes a lot of conditioning, and you wouldn't be surprised at the amount of you know, effort and discipline that it takes to get to those levels.
Absolutely.
You know, just wake up in the morning and go and do it, you know.
Yeah,
you can do that. Sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, I was talking to a band, and the young guy called, I can't remember his name now, a new band called Defects in the UK, former members of other bands. And I was watching them play live, and it was a lot of guttural vocals. He was doing growls and stuff like that there. And literally, as I was walking out of the tent, he broke into the cleanest vocal I'd probably heard on that stage all weekend. And I was like, how did he go from that to that, you know? Because most rock vocalists who'll do the guttural thing won't have the best of clean vocals. It's generally a sort of a balance there, you know? But he had the most clean vocals that I've heard of any rock vocalist in such a long time.
So there's a great band who I haven't actually listened to in some time, but is an Opeth singer, Michael Ackerfeld.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
Who has that sort of thing, you know, to a T. His singing voice has got a little bit of grit on it, you know. That sort of, but it's marginal compared to hearing these like hardcore, you know, like guttural death metal vocals, especially on the earlier stuff, where it was like the first album was called Orchid, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty much black metal, you know. It's like hard vocals and then these pretty choruses, you know, and like this clean thing. So it's really knowing your instrument and knowing the technique, and I get on stage and I must confess, I do get a little bit overwhelmed with like the energy and the vibe. I love being on the stage, you know. So a lot of technique goes out the window. So I have to like rein it in, you know, because I'm just like, yes,
okay,
I love doing this, you know. Yeah. So I'm like, just rein it in a bit, dude. You know, you still got a few songs left.
Yeah.
You know.
So then tell me about, then obviously to come back to the new project you're working with. I was listening to obviously the debut album from the guys, Turning Point. So obviously then you'll be, when you're performing live, you'll be performing stuff by the previous vocalist. So how is that for you coming in? Is it just a case of you putting your own stamp on that? Yeah.
I think that they did such a great job, and I love the vocals on Turning Point. So it's been about diving into what's there already and kind of almost paying homage to it in a certain sense and giving it my own flavor, So we have actually re-recorded one of the tunes. I mean, we've had this discussion and we decided not to go too far down that rabbit hole because I think the music that's been released to this point, we all agree has been recorded well, it's been produced well, the vocals are amazing. So, but there's like been little nuggets where we said, yeah, that would be rad to just maybe and I sort of nagged them for, admittedly, like a song that like sort of stuck out. Like I'd love to do this, and so yeah, it's been a bit, it's been a bit of a challenge to kind of sing something that's got a certain flavor and give it a similar kind of vibe, but with my own sort of style of singing, I think I'm quite a different stylistic singer. I take a different approach, at least, to the previous vocalist. So that's been a nice challenge, It's been an interesting little part of the journey so far, yeah.
Because I was just thinking I think it was the opening track on the album maybe had a bit of falsetto or something, so I was just wondering, I haven't heard anything more than the new single All My Time with yourself, so I wasn't sure whether that would be something that you're comfortable doing or something you want to avoid.
Oh yeah, no. So like, I think that Calvin or Jack and I have got probably a similar, we might both be like baritones, I would say, but falsetto and using head voice and those kind of ideas, like instead of doing like I would normally take like the 80s approach. So instead of doing like a really crisp falsetto, I might do like a 80s kind of belt instead, just because it's more of a stylistic approach, where he's got this like really nice, warm sort of bigness to the sort of lower range, and that sort of contrast of like a clean falsetto and then the bigger voice like on that lower register is a stylistic thing, and it just makes it like it's that surprise, this like big voice and then this like pretty falsetto. Sean Morgan does that a lot from Cedar, He's got this like really noticeable and weighty sort of chest voice, and then you won't often find him going into this. He doesn't really do like the 80s, scream kind of thing, but when he does get up in register past a certain point, he'll use that falsetto, and it's got a certain kind of effect that is really pleasing to the ear,
Yeah, of course. And so then, are you guys working currently on new music? If you have the new single coming out, are you guys working on like a EP or LP?
Yeah, so we've been discussing whether it will be an EP or LP. Most likely we'll be working on EPs just because of the nature of how the industry works. Most of the DSPs and that are all based on singles, really, except for Apple, I suppose. But
yeah,
it's more single-based releases. So we've been putting together a lot of ideas and chucking all these things into a melting pot of creation and just fishing ideas out. So it's been. I mean, All My Time is a cool example because it was pretty musically. It was pretty much done. At least the parts were fleshed out, and the guy sent that and a whole bunch of other ideas to me. And that one sort of stuck out the most. And we went into the studio and played around with it a bit. I went on my own as well with Dale, our drummer / producer, and. Yeah, we just spent some time working on it, and it's a really nice bond of, the new Fear Falling, so to speak, with the new singer and the previous release. It's exactly that. It meets halfway. It's a song that was sort of arranged previously, and that I, had the opportunity to put my own voice on. So. That was like the sort of start point. I think that's why we wanted to release it as well as the first new single. It just made sense.
Yeah.
And so we've been spending a lot of time, like I mentioned, in the studio, and we've got a whole lot of stuff So yeah, as far as the music writing process goes, it's been cooking. We've been cooking with gas.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? You have to sort of just, as you say, spend a bit of time, chip away at it, and see what falls. Because I'm sure obviously you're going to bring a different flavor to the songwriting, and the maybe even the direction of the vocals, etc.
So I think as a singer, the voice automatically places music in certain ways. Obviously, the instruments themselves will do that, but there is something about the voice that gives music a certain stylistic feel, and so it's been interesting to sort of revisit a couple of these ideas. As I mentioned, there is a song that we've revisited, and it's the same, but it's not the same, Yeah. And so I don't think that like the band's core, or the integrity of that sound will change too much, but it's definitely evolving as we come together as a band and put songs together and new ideas. There's definitely some magic happening, which is cool. It's one of my favorite spaces to be in, is to be in studio and to be writing and taking these like crazy ideas from my mind and putting them somewhere else. And
it must be a great thing, obviously, as you say, having an idea in your head, which then translates into a full song and a recording where you can listen back to it and go like, wow, that became either a whole different beast or just bigger than you ever imagined it could be.
Absolutely. I think that's maybe the driving force for why I keep doing what I'm doing. Is I love to write music, and I have since as far back as I can remember. That's kind of been the goal, is to share it as well, So I think these notions about fame and recognition and all that kind of thing are actually byproducts of the fact that I just want to share the best music that I can with, as wide an audience as possible. And so to be able to take these ideas and like a lot of times, you'll get a bit of tension because I'll write something amazing, or I think it is, and then I'll bring it to Really? Was that what you did this weekend?
Yeah, I know. But it's like beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and sometimes if you're listening to something over and over again, it gets ingrained in your head, and then you take it to somebody else and just look at you like, what is that? So it's a reality check as well, isn't it? You sort of ground each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also got to do with being able to go down that path with everybody so that you can understand it a lot more as an empath, because often, it takes 2 or 3 listens before something sticks. Yeah. Some of my favorite songs, they weren't my favorite songs off the bat, I remember hearing Black Hole Sun and being like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's like, that's like a rock and roll masterpiece,
I think that's why pop music is so popular, is because we can't escape it, and it just literally, we're drowned in it every single day. The radio station plays the same track 20, 30 times a day, and it becomes popular because people, it's just forced upon you. And you listen to it again and again and again. Whereas if they'd done the same thing with rock would probably be far more popular as a genre as well.
Or I saw this interview with Frank Zappa talking about this idea, saying that he preferred it back in the day when the big businessman in his suit and his cigar was the one running the record label, because he at least admitted that he didn't know anything about what music needed to be.
Yeah.
So he'd go to these psychedelic musicians and he'd say, what do you want to make? And then you put it out. And if the song's 11 minutes, they will then fine.
Yeah.
Where now we have to have this neat and tidy 3 minutes. Did I make it 4 minutes? Because the radio, and people's attention span. And I'm like, that's kind of, an unfortunate challenge that we have to deal with as artists.
Yeah.
Because I do believe that people have, all of those, they can give you that attention, It is a little bit of a give and take, though. I mean, you can't be giving the radio, all of your time all day. Sometimes it is just about having something in the background that makes you feel good. But there's so much more to artists when you really take a dive into their discography and have a look at what are they trying to portray in certain songs, and often music that is done with that honesty and that integrity eventually becomes recognized as such. And pop songs sort of fade away. They get billboards, and that must be nice, to have 10 number ones on the billboards and blah blah blah. But a lot of those tunes do sort of fade away after some time. It's when you can marry that idea. If you think about something like Michael Jackson's Thriller album, that's a great example of pop music, but that's made with like a lot of respect and a lot of mastery of the craft and understanding. There's certain beats, the Billie Jean beat, that drum groove is like, you can't not, you just hear, and you can't help yourself. You're like, wow, and it's lived in the music realm all this time. So it's fun.
Eddie Van Halen's solo on it, which is so.
Exactly. Yeah. The 80s pop stars at least had like shreddy guitars. Stevie Ray Vaughan on Bowie stuff, and
absolutely, and Steve Lukather and stuff like has played in so many session albums. They've lost track of the sort of stuff that he's played on over the years that we'd never realize if these guys are involved in, or their hands are intertwined in it. But yeah, like it's a weird time we're living in now, and as you sort of touched on there, it's hard to imagine what people will look back in 20, 30 years time. Like, will Ed Sheeran have any relevance whatsoever at all? Is it just a number?
Yeah.
People like that there. Whereas at the weekend I was chatting with a guy called Tony Dolan. He's a bassist and vocalist for Venom Inc. And he was saying to me, I was talking to him, they started the band in 1979. I said to him, look, I was 5 years of age when I was 1979. I said, like, what was the music scene like? And he said, well, like, I came back from Canada. I was used to sort of what the rock scene was like over there. And when I came across to the UK, it was literally punk. And I didn't understand it, just couldn't fathom what it was. I wanted to get into music, couldn't fathom it. And a friend said, come and watch a gig. A couple of hippies with long hair and beards. He says, I don't want to watch hippies with long hair and beards. And he says he went to the gig and it was Motorhead. And he said, I can do that. He said, that's what I want to do. That sort of ballsy attitude of, and he says, but even then, people wouldn't take Motorhead seriously. They didn't rate them, didn't listen to music, didn't like them. But now, obviously, a band like that is iconic today. And sometimes you need time and distance from these things, don't you really?
Yeah. Resonate? So I definitely think that you as an artist, you kind of, you take this strive to start to prove yourself, whether you like it or not. And if you're doing it for approval, then you're probably starting on the wrong foot.
Absolutely, yeah.
But with that being said, so the musical integrity has to be there, whether you want to write pop songs or not. I don't have like any negativity or negative notions towards musicians who want to perform pop music and that kind of thing. So long as you're doing that with artistic integrity, and if you the flip side of this whole thing is, we kind of mentioned it earlier, which is like trends, musical trends. And so culture often does dictate what kind of music is front and center in the mainstream. And then sort of the underground will then dictate the kind of an opposite, but equally sort of vibey, response to that, So if you think about like punk rock music becoming, it wasn't mainstream music until somebody at a label said, you know what, we should sign the Sex Pistols because the kids are going to dig this.
Yeah.
But before that, Sid Vicious and the dudes were just a bunch of, scallywags and,
Absolutely.
punkers, and nobody wanted to have anything to do with it until they realized like, oh, we can all latch on, I mean, even today I see in clothing shops like branded T-shirts, like Metallica T-shirts and all this kind of thing. And then, you know, these kids walk, and like, I'm like, cool. Hopefully you'll like read that your shirt is Led Zeppelin, and then you'll Google and you'll be like, wow, this is amazing.
A friend just used the example the other day, says that her friend works for a charity, and a teenage charity, and some girl walked in with a Metallica T-shirt on, and she went, "Oh, cool, Metallica, you like Metallica?" And she went, "Oh, are they a band? Didn't realize."
No, what?
Yeah, you know?
Who's she?
Yeah, he just bought a T-shirt out of a shop because it looked cool. You thought it was a cool logo, but it's actually a band. You know, it's that's the reality of the world. But I've got a Beatles T-shirt. I bought it in America when I was on holiday about 5 years ago. And the sad thing about it is underneath it, it says Apple Incorporated, because they bought the rights to the music, you know. So it's so depressing. The modern world is just corporate, and music now is
corporate, and you know, yeah. So it is we need to be able to sort of push those boundaries as artists, and we're all sort of looking for these elements in life, you know, that we think will make us happy. Like if I make this much money, then I'll be happy, and if I can do this, then I'll be happy. And you know, art, I got to pay the bills from my art. You know, this is what I do. This is my job. So I don't have like an IT job or something and then do this on the weekend. You know, this is what I do. So I got to get paid. So there's this balancing thing between, like, I'm making music that is good music, or that I think is good music, and then sort of selling it. You know, there is that juggle, but you have to be able to take these realities and do something that makes you feel comfortable, you know, and take on those responsibilities. I could start a Rage Against the Machine, you know, 2022 South African version band, but am I really prepared to take on that responsibility then, you know? If I want to be some sort of like anti-political machine, I got to decide if that's like the life that I want to lead, you know?
Yeah. And
that, you know, what is Spider-Man? Eh? With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. I know. And dodgy spandex outfits.
Yeah.
Well, look, Ross, on that note, I will leave it there, because I've taken up enough of your time, but it was great talking to you, man.
No, it's been fantastic.
Very easy to talk to. We'll get together another time when you guys have more music out. Sure, we'll chew the fat then.
Awesome. I'd really love to come back on your show. Thanks so much for having me, man.
My pleasure. And as I say, just a reminder for everybody out there, South African rock supergroup Fear of Falling dropping the latest single, All My Time, this coming Friday, August 19th. Once again, big thank you, Ross Harding.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Ross, no problem. Talk to you soon, bro. Take care.
Cheers, brother.